Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When we bought our dream home in a quiet suburb, we thought we'd found peace. But then, she took over the HOA and turned our neighborhood into a dictatorship. Fines, fear, and control followed. We didn't start a war, but we sure as hell finished one. I bought that house 5 years ago, back when I was 30, fresh off a series of smart financial decisions, a decent job in tech, and a growing sense that it was time to plant roots. My wife and I had just gotten married, and the idea of settling into a quiet, well-kept neighborhood where kids rode bikes, sprinklers hissed across green lawns, and neighbors actually waved hello sounded damn near utopian. The place wasn't flashy, but it had character, wide sidewalks, decent schools, and, most importantly, a homeowners association that kept everything neat, trimmed, and peaceful. Back then, I didn't even mind the idea of a HOA. Sure, people grumbled about them online, but ours seemed reasonable. Dues were low, meetings were rare, and the board was made up of retirees who just wanted to make sure no one painted their house neon green or parked a boat on the front lawn. Hell, I even went to one of the early meetings. They served store-brand cookies and lukewarm coffee in the community center and spent most of the time arguing over whose dog left a pile by the tennis court. Boring, comforting. Our street was mostly young families, a few older couples, and the occasional ambitious flipper trying to turn a two-bedroom into an open-concept modern monstrosity. We made friends. We hosted barbecues. My daughter learned to ride her bike on the same pavement, where I chatted with my neighbor about the best time to reseed the lawn. It felt like we'd found a little pocket of stability in a world that seemed increasingly cracked. And for 3 solid years, it stayed that way. Then Harold, the HOA president, a former school principal with a tan windbreaker and a suspiciously powerful love for Robert's Rules of Order, announced he was stepping down due to health issues. He'd kept the trains running on time, as they say, and most people figured we'd elect someone similar, mild, organized, inoffensive. Instead, we got Karen. I didn't vote for her, not out of spite, just instinct. She was new to the neighborhood, only moved in a year prior, and something about the way she smiled too wide while talking about enforcing standards rubbed me the wrong way. But she campaigned like it was the goddamn mayoral race. Flyers, emails, personalized door-to-door introductions where she dropped phrases like increased property value and streamlining enforcement. Most folks were charmed by her can-do attitude. I figured worst case, she'd get bored after a few months and we'd go back to arguing about which shrubs were technically native species. The first few months under Karen were fine. Meetings got longer, more formal. Dues went up slightly, but it was framed as a necessary adjustment to account for inflation and long-deferred landscaping. A few new rules were added, minor things like limiting street parking overnight and stricter trash bin placements. Nothing outrageous. I rolled my eyes but paid my dues, kept my head down, focused on work, and helped coach my kids' soccer team on Saturdays. But then came the spreadsheets. Karen started publishing monthly HOA newsletters, dense data-packed monstrosities full of charts and bullet points. She introduced a compliance review subcommittee and posted rankings, actual public rankings, of whose yards were most visually cohesive. She didn't call people out by name, of course. She used lot numbers, but everyone knew who lived where. It was subtle enough to seem professional, but pointed enough to feel personal, and something in the air started to shift. The retirees on the board started resigning, quietly, one by one, replaced by Karen's recommended volunteers, younger, well-dressed types who didn't say much during meetings, but always voted yes when Karen proposed a new motion. The neighborhood stopped feeling like a community and started feeling like a management firm. Still, I didn't raise hell. I had a job, a family, a mortgage, and more important things to do than get into a power struggle with someone who wore a name tag to block parties. Besides, things still looked nice. The parks were mowed, the roads got resealed. The place stayed safe. Even if the rules were tightening, I figured we could live with it. I was wrong, but I didn't know that yet. At first, I tried to give Karen the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was just ambitious. Maybe all that streamlining nonsense was coming from a genuine place. But it didn't take long before it became crystal clear. This wasn't about improving the neighborhood. It was about control. A few months into her term, things started changing, fast and with zero subtlety. The first sign, dues went up again. Not a little, not even moderately. They jumped by 30%, and just like that, we were paying the highest HOA fees in the entire zip code. Karen's explanation: increased maintenance costs and proactive community investments. Whatever the hell that meant. And yet, nothing got better. The playground still had the same splintered wood and rusted bolts. The sidewalk near the corner lot remained cracked. The pool chairs were the same busted plastic ones that Harold had inherited from the Clinton administration. But somehow, the HOA's budget now had a six-figure annual line for infrastructure modernization. When I asked what exactly that included, I got a PDF full of vague buzzwords and a note thanking me for my interest in community stewardship. Meanwhile, people started getting fined. Not just the usual stuff, like forgetting to bring in bins or leaving Christmas lights up into February, but weird, petty things. A neighbor got hit with a $200 fine because her mailbox was inconsistent with the approved visual language of the neighborhood. Another was cited for decorative elements exceeding permitted count, which turned out to mean she had too many flower pots. It was getting ridiculous. And then it came for me. I got my first warning in the form of a bright orange envelope literally taped, to my garage door. According to the letter, I had committed a Class B violation for inadequate edge definition between turf and hardscape. That's HOA speak for not edging the damn lawn. I stood there reading it in disbelief while holding my daughter's soccer cleats. My edging was fine. My whole yard was fine. I even used one of those overpriced trimmers with the swivel head. So I went to the next HOA meeting. Just to observe, I told myself, not to make a scene. I sat in the back, arms crossed, listening to Karen drone on about compliance metrics and architectural cohesion. Every time someone tried to raise a concern, she shut it down with bureaucratic charm. That's something we'll address in subcommittee. We can circle back to that offline. That item wasn't on the agenda for this evening. It was like watching a hostile takeover of a coffee club. I looked around the room and saw the same expression on half a dozen faces. Quiet frustration, barely restrained. One guy, Jason from Lot 17, tried to challenge a recent increase in parking restrictions, and Karen hit him with a smile so tight it could cut glass. "I understand change is difficult," she said sweetly, "but those of us who voted for progress are ready to move forward." I didn't speak up that night. I didn't want to end up with 3 citations and a scheduled compliance walkthrough of my property. I just nodded, went home, and vented to my wife. We agreed it was all a little nuts, but we'd keep our heads down. After all, we'd survived HOA nonsense before. It's all bark, right? Wrong. Karen started sending out performance reports, monthly mailers showing how many fines had been issued, which areas had the highest compliance, and anonymized risk zones with charts showing where community standards were under threat. It was psychological warfare in pastel letterhead. And while no one said it out loud, everyone knew what she was doing, targeting the families who didn't vote for her. We were all being squeezed, slowly, strategically. And then came the whispers, rumors that Karen was trying to push certain families out. A young couple 2 blocks down said they were suddenly bombarded with inspections after missing a single dues payment. Another neighbor swore his roof repair got rejected 3 times for non-conforming color tone, despite using the exact shade listed on the HOA's approved list. People were getting paranoid, trading stories on encrypted Facebook groups, and still, no one dared speak publicly. Karen had installed fear like a smart thermostat, invisible, automated, and always running. I kept trying to stay neutral. I still waved at Karen when I saw her walking her little designer dog around the block, leash taut, judgment in her eyes. I still paid my dues on time, still trimmed my hedges, kept my mailbox compliant, my patio furniture earth-toned, my seasonal decorations within code. But something had changed in me. I'd started looking at my house not as a home, but as a liability. A place I could lose points for, a trap waiting for some made-up infraction. I wasn't living in a neighborhood anymore. I was living in a spreadsheet. We'd been planning the trip for months. A full week in Maui with the family, away from emails, obligations, and, most importantly, Karen. My wife found a quiet rental near the beach. My daughter was counting down the days, and I had already packed my Kindle with trashy spy novels and promised myself I wouldn't check work email once. We needed the break, badly. 3 days before the flight, we got a notice in the mail, thick envelope, HOA letterhead, urgent red stamp on the corner, mandatory community assembly, All homeowners required to attend. The meeting was scheduled for the exact week we'd be away, mid-Thursday evening at the clubhouse. Of course it was. My first instinct was to ignore it. I mean, mandatory in HOA speak is more of a strong suggestion, right? But then I remembered who we were dealing with. This wasn't Harold and his cookie trays anymore. This was Karen, and Karen didn't do suggestions. I texted Trevor, my neighbor and part-time fence sitter in all things HOA. Hey, I'm going to be out of town next week. Can you go to the meeting and let me know what madness unfolds? He texted back a thumbs up and a gif of a guy walking into a burning building with a mug of coffee. That about summed it up. I figured I'd catch up on the nonsense when we got back. That was the plan. Pack sunscreen, ignore HOA drama, sip Mai Tais on a beach somewhere far, far away from compliance codes. And for the first few days, it worked. We landed in Maui, rented a Jeep, hit the beach, ate overpriced fish tacos, and let the tension drain out of our shoulders. I even managed not to look at my phone beyond the occasional vacation selfie and sending a couple, "Screw you, I'm on a beach" photos to my coworkers. On the day of the meeting, I didn't even think about it. I was watching my daughter jump waves while my wife read a book under a straw umbrella. Karen was a different time zone away, and for the first time in months, I remembered what breathing felt like. Then, 2 days before we were supposed to fly back, I got a text from Trevor. "Bro, it was bad. You're not gonna like it. Call me when you land." Like, immediately. No elaboration, just dread. We landed Sunday evening. The moment we stepped off the plane, my notifications lit up like a slot machine. Trevor had left me 3 voicemails, 2 emails from the HOA, and a digital copy of a packet titled Revised Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. Mandatory acknowledgement required. I called Trevor on the drive home, my wife behind the wheel, our daughter asleep in the back seat. He didn't even say hello, just dove in. They rewrote the bylaws, he said. Karen steamrolled the vote. Barely anyone showed up because of the last-minute notice, and the ones who did were mostly her little HOA cult. She passed new terms. You need to sign them or get fined. The dues went up by 65%. 65, man. I rubbed my eyes. You're kidding. I wish, but that's not the worst of it. Of course not. They implemented a new roof conformity standard, something about water diversion infrastructure and unified aesthetic compliance. They're pushing to redo all roofs that don't fit their template. Your house is on the list. Apparently, it doesn't align with the updated community drainage model. My roof's like 5 years old. Doesn't matter. They want 30% of the houses redone. You're in that 30. I looked at my wife, who was already shaking her head silently from the driver's seat. What else? Oh yeah, there's a new fine for failing to appear at essential community governance meetings without justified written cause. You're down a few hundred already. They left something taped to your garage. Not sure what it said, but it was red. I stared out the window. I could feel the warmth of Hawaii already fading out of my bones. The next morning, over burnt home-brewed coffee, my wife and I sat at the kitchen table and went over the documents. It was all there in legalese. New fee structures required architectural changes, penalties for non-compliance. You couldn't even sell your house now without proving your roof met the HOA's approved standards. It was insane. I looked at the new terms. 8 pages of control disguised as community integrity. I hadn't signed anything yet, but I already felt owned. My wife was the one who finally said it. "I think we need to start looking at moving," she said quietly. This isn't sustainable. It's like living under surveillance." I nodded slowly. "We either leave on our terms, or they keep squeezing us until we break." We clinked coffee mugs in exhausted agreement. We didn't know it yet, but we'd just spoken our first lines in a war we didn't ask for. One that hadn't even properly begun. We pulled into the driveway just after 9 at night, the sky dark and heavy with late summer humidity. Everyone was tired, hungry, cranky. Post-vacation come-down in full effect. The house sat quiet, porch light still on thanks to the timer, a thin layer of dust over the mailbox. Everything looked exactly as we'd left it, until I tried the front door. The key didn't fit. At first, I thought maybe I'd grabbed the wrong one off my keyring. I tried again. No dice. My wife came over, tried her copy. Same deal. We looked at each other, confusion turning to unease. I stepped back and glanced at the lock. New, shinier, cleaner than the old one. It wasn't just jammed. It had been replaced. My stomach dropped. "What the hell?" I muttered. We circled around to the back door. Also changed. Same shiny new hardware. I tried the garage. Keypad dead. Not out of batteries, just unresponsive. My wife flicked on her phone flashlight and checked the breaker box outside. Nothing tripped. We were locked out of our own goddamn house. The first thought that hit me was that we'd been robbed. Then I remembered Karen. My wife looked under the doormat, more out of habit than hope. She froze. There's a letter. It was printed on official HOA letterhead, sealed in plastic, and taped to the concrete in a Ziploc bag like it was some kind of evidence in a crime scene. Dear homeowner, due to the unreported and extended absence of your household and the lack of emergency contact provided, the HOA board has taken precautionary action to secure your property. Effective immediately, your home has been locked and will remain so until the following actions are completed. Submission of written explanation for absence exceeding 5 consecutive days. Completion of updated CC&R acknowledgement forms. Payment of overdue special assessment fees and non-appearance penalty. Confirmation of intent to comply with mandatory roofing compliance initiative. Failure to comply may result in continued restriction of access for security purposes. With respect, Karen D. Whitmore, President, HOA. With respect, my ass. My wife looked up from the letter. Can she even legally do this? No, I said immediately. No chance in hell. I called a locksmith on speakerphone while also dialing the non-emergency police line. When the dispatcher heard the situation, she said they'd send a patrol officer to document the incident. We've had similar calls lately, she added flatly. That was comforting. 20 minutes later, Officer Ramirez pulled up, cruiser lights flashing gently. I showed him the letter. His eyebrows went up before I even finished reading. They changed your locks without a court order? While I was out of town for a week. Yeah, that's not okay. The locksmith arrived soon after. Ramirez watched as he drilled through the deadbolt. I winced at the sound. It was like breaking into my own life. We stepped inside. Everything was untouched. No signs of burglary. The place even smelled like air freshener from the auto diffuser we'd left running. It was just off. Like the house had been invaded by rules instead of people, violated by protocol. I walked through the living room in silence, trying to process. The rage came later, slow, cold, complete. Ramirez took my statement, photographed the new locks, and shook his head. She's going to have a hard time explaining this one. You're the legal owner. She's not a landlord. This is private property. HOA has no authority to lock you out, not without a court injunction, which she didn't have. He nodded. You should press charges. Oh, I will, I said. Believe me. After he left, I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and started digging. My wife brought me a beer without a word, sat down beside me. We went through everything. Our original CC&Rs, the HOA bylaws, the amendments from the last meeting, and the packet Karen left on the garage. And there it was, buried on page 5 of the revised rules. Extended property vacancy may trigger emergency security measures at discretion of board president, with notification to follow. It was a loophole, a flimsy, vague clause with no teeth, and no legal precedence. It didn't give her the right to change our locks. It barely gave her the right to leave a note. But she did it anyway. She was testing the limits, seeing how far she could go before someone pushed back. Well, congratulations, Karen. You just found the line. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I went full scorched earth and booked a consultation with Kristen Morales, a local attorney known for 2 things, demolishing abusive HOAs and wearing blood-red lipstick in court. Her office had hardwood floors, a vintage bookshelf full of dusty property law manuals, and a framed quote behind her desk that read, "Property rights are civil rights." I liked her immediately. She listened carefully as I laid it all out. The trip, the lock change, the fake emergency clause, the compliance penalties, the letter under my doormat that read like a ransom note. When I finished, she leaned back, folded her arms, and said, "Okay, first off, what they did was completely illegal. Second, I hope you're ready for this to get messy because she's been getting away with this crap for a while." Wait, you've heard of her. Kristen pulled out a thin file. Karen D. Whitmore, former real estate agent, license revoked 3 years ago for ethical violations and coercive sales practices. She's got a history, and she's been hiding it behind that HOA badge. She's not running a neighborhood. She's running a racket. Turns out I wasn't the first. Kristen had two other clients from nearby developments who'd also crossed paths with Karen. One had been forced to sell her home at a loss after a storm of back-to-back violations. Another had tried to fight back and mysteriously ended up with a lien on his house over unpaid beautification assessments. Classic bullying tactics wrapped in legalese. But what Karen didn't count on was me lawyering up. Kristen helped me file a formal complaint with the police, and we began building a civil case. Trespassing, illegal lockout, emotional distress, abuse of position, attempted coercion, and misappropriation of authority. That same day, I emailed the HOA board requesting an emergency review of Karen's actions and threatening legal action if they didn't respond. Their reply? A smug two-line email signed by Karen herself. All actions taken were within the guidelines of the new HOA policy as voted on by the community. Your cooperation is expected. Cooperation, my ass. Then came the second letter, this time hand-delivered by one of the compliance officers Karen had recently hired. They weren't real cops, just rent-a-cops with walkie-talkies and reflective vests who looked like mall security rejects. The letter was thicker, more official-looking, and contained a new invoice. Total amount due, $2,480. Breakdown: failure to attend HOA emergency meeting, $350. Late submission of travel disclosure form, $125. Non-compliance with roofing update mandate, $1,650. Administrative processing fee, $250. Paper notice handling surcharge, $105. A paper handling surcharge? Really, my wife stood over my shoulder while I read it. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her jaw was clenched hard enough to crack enamel. We weren't paying a dime. That evening, we sent out a neighborhood-wide email, blunt, detailed, and packed with evidence. I laid out exactly what Karen had done to us. I attached photos of the changed locks, copies of the absurd fines, audio clips from Trevor's phone. He'd secretly recorded the HOA meeting, bless his paranoid little heart, and even a PDF of Kristen's legal summary stating that Karen's lockout stunt violated California Civil Code Section 78. The subject line was simple: "How long before it's your door?" It hit like a bomb. Within 24 hours, my inbox was overflowing. People I hadn't spoken to in months were suddenly writing novels, sharing their own experiences, apologizing for staying silent, asking how to join the fight. Some were cautious, some furious, some terrified, but there was movement. Cracks in the wall. A retired couple named George and Eliza emailed me the most damning thing of all: copies of internal HOA documents they'd found in a misaddressed envelope that ended up in their mailbox. It included a draft proposal for the property recapture program, a thinly veiled scheme that would allow the HOA to intervene on non-compliant properties and offer them for expedited market reentry. Translation: force sales, then flip the homes to buyers aligned with community standards. And guess which real estate firm the memo listed as the preferred partner for future listings? D. Whitmore Holdings, LLC, Karen's company, still active, registered in the next county over, under her cousin's name. It wasn't just about me. This was a scam, a long game. Karen had been engineering violations to lower home values, push people out, and funnel the properties through her backdoor business. Our HOA wasn't a community, it was a front. Kristen's eyes practically lit up when I gave her the files. "This just went from civil to criminal," she said. "You keep collecting evidence. Let me handle the court, and trust me, she is not ready for what's coming." Things escalated faster than I could have predicted. Once the neighborhood got wind of what Karen had been up to, the shady fines, the forced roof mandates, the lockouts, the collective mood shifted from annoyed compliance to open rebellion. And I don't use that word lightly. Within days, several neighbors filed their own complaints. A small group of us, 10 households, all previously targeted, formed a kind of resistance cell. We met in George and Eliza's garage at night like it was a Cold War spy movie, passing around copies of HOA meeting transcripts, scanned citations, and any dirt we could find on Karen's cronies. We even gave ourselves a stupid name, the 49ers, not because of the football team, but because Karen's fine for non-compliant roof angles was 49 degrees or less. Yeah, that's how ridiculous it had gotten. Karen, of course, didn't sit idly by. It started with surveillance. Not real surveillance, just HOA volunteers with clipboards loitering near our driveways, snapping photos under the guise of compliance documentation. One guy stood across the street from my house for 2 hours, just writing notes in a little black notebook like he was doing a birdwatching survey on my front yard. Next came the wellness checks. 3 different households, including mine, had visits from HOA-affiliated security contractors claiming they were checking for safety violations. They tried to enter Eliza's backyard. George chased one of them off with a broom. Then came the threats, subtle at first, letters, emails, reminders of our obligations. Cryptic language like ongoing non-compliance may result in community action, but when those didn't work, Karen escalated to muscle. On a Thursday afternoon, 2 days before our emergency town hall, which we forced through with a signed petition, screw her agenda, 3 private security guards showed up at my front door. They wore tactical black uniforms, bulletproof vests, and those obnoxious aviator sunglasses that scream, "Wannabe SWAT team." One of them even had a clipboard. Always the damn clipboard. "Sir," the lead guy said, "we've been authorized by the HOA to conduct a formal perimeter inspection for ongoing violations. You're not getting on my property. This is a compliance matter. This is private property. You step on it, and I swear to God, I'll have you arrested." He glanced at the others, clearly not used to being told no by someone who wasn't holding a latte and a yoga mat. "I've already filed a police report," I said, holding it up. "And guess what? The HOA president is under investigation for fraud. You want to be part of that? You want your name in my lawsuit?" They left. Later that night, I found one of our lawn gnomes smashed to pieces near the mailbox. Coincidence? Maybe. Probably not. But I wasn't scared. I was furious. The next day, someone, we still don't know who, leaked an internal HOA email chain to Kristen. It was between Karen and 3 of her board members. The tone, smug, condescending, full of phrases like filtering out non-compliant owners, leveraging fear to ensure conformity, and short-term resistance is acceptable loss. It even included a draft schedule for forced roof replacements, complete with target properties and estimated resale values post-restoration. They were treating us like spreadsheet variables, assets to flip, obstructions to remove. And then, as if she were actively trying to commit cartoon villainy, Karen called the cops on me. Saturday morning, just after sunrise, 3 sheriff deputies showed up responding to a civil disturbance complaint. According to dispatch records, which I requested later, Karen had claimed that I was threatening HOA members, blocking access to community facilities, and potentially storing unauthorized materials in my garage. "Like what?" I asked the deputy. "An unregistered trampoline? Contraband lawn chairs?" To their credit, the deputies were cool about it. They took my statement, apologized, and left. One of them even said, "I'm real tired of getting called to this neighborhood over HOA nonsense." But the message was clear. Karen wasn't going down without swinging. That same evening, we held our town hall. It was supposed to be in the community center. Karen locked the doors and claimed there was a security risk, so we met in the park instead. Over 50 residents showed up. Folding chairs, water bottles, even a goddamn microphone and speaker system someone borrowed from a church. And I spoke. I laid it all out. The illegal lockouts, the manipulated bylaw changes, the surveillance, the intimidation tactics, the fraud, the personal enrichment scheme. I handed out packets. I cited laws. I played audio from HOA meetings that Trevor had recorded. I even showed side-by-side photos of properties before and after Karen's upgrades, homes that had been bought cheap after fines piled up, then flipped through Whitmore Holdings for double the price. People gasped. Some cried. A few shouted. Karen wasn't there. Of course she wasn't, but her spell was broken, and when I opened the floor, the floodgates burst. Jason stood up and said his fence was declared non-conforming, and he was fined $700 after Karen's cousin made an unsolicited offer to buy his house for cash and quick closing. He refused. 2 weeks later, he got notice of a lien. Samantha, a single mom from the next block, said her mailbox was vandalized twice, and then she got fined for unsightly property frontage. Even one of the HOA board members, a soft-spoken woman named Carla, stood up and admitted she'd been pressured to vote for proposals she didn't understand. "Karen told us we'd all be liable if we didn't follow the plan," she said quietly. I was scared, but I'm done being scared. That night, we voted to suspend Karen from her role as president, pending investigation. It wasn't legally binding, not yet. The bylaws made it hard, but the people had spoken loudly. The next morning, she sent out a mass email declaring the vote invalid and accusing me of inciting mob behavior. I printed it out, highlighted the part where she called me a radical property anarchist, and pinned it to my fridge. For the first time in a long while, I laughed. The war wasn't over, but for once, I felt like we were finally holding the damn line. I didn't sleep the night before the hearing. Not from nerves. I was way past nerves, but from pure, unfiltered adrenaline. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan, cycling through every document, every photo, every affidavit. I was ready. Kristen was already waiting outside the courthouse when I arrived. Red blazer, coffee in hand, the scent of legal vengeance practically radiating off her. She handed me a folder and said, "We're going to bury her today." The courtroom was packed. Locals, reporters, even a YouTuber who apparently covered HOA horror stories. Karen sat at the defendant's table, expression locked in that creepy Stepford smile she wore when she was losing control. Her attorney, a smug man in a gray suit who looked like he charged by the syllable, whispered something to her. She didn't react, just stared straight ahead like she was still HOA president of the universe. The case was technically about illegal lockout and abuse of HOA authority, but Kristen made sure the judge knew. This wasn't a petty neighborhood squabble. It was systemic abuse, organized manipulation, fraud disguised as community service. First, Kristen walked the court through the lock change, how Karen had used a fake clause buried in the updated CC&Rs to justify locking me out of my own home. She cited California Civil Code Section 789.3, which very clearly states, no one, not even an HOA, can exclude a property owner from their own residence without a court order. Then came the financials. Kristen dropped a stack of printouts like a mic. Transaction records from Whitmore Holdings showing real estate transfers for 9 properties over the past 2 years. All of them in our neighborhood. All of them previously owned by residents who had mysteriously fallen out of compliance right before selling under market value. She brought up one of them, Mrs. Langford, an elderly widow who had lived on Elmwood Drive since the 1980s. Karen fined her repeatedly over excessive lawn ornaments, issued warnings for paint tone discrepancies, then listed her home on the HOA bulletin board as potentially abandoned. 2 months later, it was bought for 2/3 of market rate. And guess who handled the sale? Whitmore Holdings. Kristen presented emails, ones leaked from Karen's inner circle, that used phrases like strategic reclamation, aesthetic value optimization, and target properties. The courtroom was dead silent, except for Karen, who looked like someone had just unplugged her soul. Then came the audio. Trevor's recording, the one from the HOA meeting where Karen said, "If they won't play by the rules, we'll just replace them. We control the standard. We control the neighborhood." Kristen let that one hang in the air like smoke. Karen's attorney tried to object, claiming the audio was recorded without consent. The judge shut it down. California is a 2-party consent state, but this was a public meeting. Overruled. And then came the pièce de résistance. Kristen called Carla, the board member who'd flipped during our town hall. Under oath, Carla explained how Karen had pressured the board to pass motions they barely understood. She admitted Karen had manipulated agendas, skipped transparency votes, and threatened legal action against any board member who questioned her. "She told us," Carla said, voice trembling slightly, "that non-compliant owners were holding the community back, that the faster we cleared them out, the faster we'd see value growth." "And what did she mean by value growth?" Kristen asked. "She meant flipping homes through her company." Even the judge's eyebrows went up. Then Kristen turned to me for testimony. I kept it simple. I walked the court through our vacation, the lockout, the bogus charges, the fake security inspections, and the police reports. I explained how it wasn't just about me. It was about everyone Karen had steamrolled for profit under the flag of community harmony. At one point I said, this wasn't a HOA, it was a real estate funnel. She didn't care about the neighborhood. She cared about who owned it. Karen's defense team tried a weak counterattack, claiming she'd acted within the bylaws, that she had community support, that any property gains were coincidental. But it was over. Everyone knew it. Even her lawyer looked like he was already drafting a settlement agreement in his head. The judge took a recess. When he returned, the ruling was swift and beautiful. Karen was found guilty of illegal lockout, abuse of authority, intentional infliction of emotional distress, civil conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, violation of state HOA governance laws. Sentence, 18 months in county jail. No. Parole. Personal fine of $150,000 payable to the state. Restitution to affected homeowners, including me, $290,000 covering financial losses, legal costs, and punitive damages. 3 other board members were banned from holding any governance role in any HOA for 10 years and fined between $15,000 and $40,000 each. Karen just sat there. No outburst, no apology, just silence. Like the whole world had finally gone quiet around her. Kristen patted my arm. That, my friend, is what we call a judicial curb stomp. The courtroom erupted into soft applause as we walked out. Reporters swarmed. I gave one statement, short, simple. No one has the right to lock you out of your own home. Not a thief, not a politician, not a wannabe queen in a pantsuit. We left the courthouse free, but more than that, we left it vindicated. They took the for sale sign down 2 days before we moved out. We didn't have to wait long. After the verdict hit local news, buyers started circling like sharks. Some were thrill seekers who just wanted to live in the neighborhood from that HOA story. Others were investors, no doubt hoping to pick at the bones. But we ended up selling to a young couple with a toddler and a big dumb Labrador, people who reminded us of ourselves back when we first moved in. Wide-eyed, hopeful, before everything turned into a legal war zone. The sale closed fast. Kristen helped push the deal through without HOA interference, thanks to the ruling that dissolved the association's authority pending a full community reorganization. That's lawyer speak for nobody's in charge anymore. Good luck. It was over. Karen went to jail. They didn't cuff her in court, too much decorum, I guess, but I heard she cried when they took her down to booking. Her mugshot was on the evening news. No lipstick, no smile, just a blank hollow face framed by a county-issued jumpsuit. Whitmore Holdings was shut down by the state, assets frozen, investigations pending. Her cousin vanished into whatever hole he crawled out of. Of the remaining board, 2 fled the state. 1 went silent, and Carla, the only one with a spine, stayed. She called me after the trial, thanked me for speaking up, and said she'd help rebuild a real HOA, one that protected property, not pillaged it. I wished her luck, but I wanted no part of it. We were done. Packing was strangely cathartic. My wife handled most of it with surgical precision. She was emotionally finished with the house long before I was. Our daughter helped decorate the boxes with stickers and glitter glue. I found myself wandering from room to room, saying silent goodbyes to the life we thought we'd live here. The birthday parties, the backyard soccer games, the late-night movies, and, yeah, even the rage-fueled meetings and police visits. We'd fought hard, but that house wasn't home anymore. It was a battleground, and we were ready for peace. On the morning of the move, Trevor stopped by with coffee and one last dad joke. He hugged me awkwardly, like guys do when we're trying not to feel anything too strongly, and said, "You know, you could have just joined the board and changed things from the inside." I laughed. "Yeah, but then I'd be the one writing fines for lawn gnomes." Fair. He waved us off as we pulled away. Just another suburban street in just another California town, only this one had scars now, the kind that didn't show up on Zillow. But the story didn't end there. A month after we settled into our new place, a modest home in a neighborhood with no HOA, no block captains, no fake patrols, I got a letter in the mail, no return address, handwritten. Inside was a single sheet of paper. They tried the same thing in Hillside Estates. Different face, same scam. We heard what you did. Thought you should know. No name, just a phone number. I stared at it for a long time. My wife caught me holding it and raised an eyebrow. "You're not thinking of getting involved again, are you?" I smiled, folded the note, and tucked it into a drawer. No, but it's good to know I'm not the only one who pushed back. Later that night, I stepped out onto the porch of our new home. No security cameras, no HOA memos, just a quiet breeze and a lawn I could mow whenever the hell I felt like it. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel watched. I felt free.